You ever look up at a plane and wonder what the pilot is really doing up there? I mean, it's not just steering, right? Well, it's this constant, disciplined act of seeing what's almost invisible. So let's dive into one of the most critical skills that keeps our skies safe. And we're going to start with a story that is honestly going to stop your heart.
Okay, so picture this. You're flying, thousands of feet up in the air, and you see that. Just a tiny, unmoving dot. Now, I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, right? A dot? But for a pilot, that is probably one of the most terrifying things they could ever see.
So this isn't just a hypothetical. This exact thing happened to a pilot flying over the super busy airspace in Florida. He's just cruising along, minding his own business, and an air traffic controller chimes in with a routine traffic advisory. He looks out his windshield and there it is, that single, motionless dot. And he didn't even hesitate. Not for a second. He immediately yanked the plane into a hard 90-degree turn and just dove. A quick glance at his instruments confirmed exactly what he feared. Another plane, just 2 miles ahead, at the exact same altitude and heading in the same direction. He just narrowly avoided a midair collision. But why? Why was a motionless object the signal for extreme, immediate danger?
Well, it all comes down to a really simple but kind of counterintuitive rule of physics. Think about it. When you're moving, everything around you should also look like it's moving, right? If something out there isn't, you've got a huge problem. Okay, so here's the absolute key. If an object in the sky isn't drifting left or right or up or down against your windshield, it means you and that object are on a collision course. You're both set to be in the exact same spot in the sky at the exact same time. And that's not good. It's such a weird paradox of perception, isn't it? An airplane that's streaking across your view, that's no problem at all. You can see it's going to pass right by. But that tiny little speck that isn't moving, that's the one that spells imminent danger. So how on earth do pilots train themselves to spot this deadly little dot?
Well, they use a technique that is drilled into them from day one of flight school. It's often just called see and avoid. But this is not a casual glance out the window. Oh no, it's a super methodical, really disciplined process for actively, constantly searching the sky. First off, you can't just scan the whole sky at once. It's way too big. So pilots break it down into small, manageable pieces. They scan in little segments of no more than 10 degrees at a time. And if you want a reference for that, just hold your fist out at arm's length. That width, that's about 10 degrees. And here's the other key. They don't just sweep their eyes across the sky. That doesn't work. Instead, they hold their gaze on each one of those 10-degree segments for at least a full second, sometimes even up to 5 seconds. Why? Because it takes that long for your eyes to actually register and detect a tiny little object against that huge empty background. The whole process is just so systematic. First, a pilot will focus their eyes way out on the distant horizon. That helps adjust for distance. Then, they start methodically working their way across the windshield, one 10-degree block at a time, spending a few seconds on each piece. The most critical area they're looking at is a little band, about 3 fingers wide, right above and below the horizon line. Once they do a full pass, guess what? They reset their focus on the horizon and start the whole thing all over again.
Yeah, this is absolutely not passive sightseeing. It's a constant mental battle. It's an exhausting, conscious effort to build a complete mental map of the sky around you, all while fighting that natural tendency for your eyes to just, relax and stare off into space. Now, of course, in a modern cockpit, pilots aren't completely on their own with this. Thankfully, they have some really incredible technology and human support that acts like an extra set of eyes, building this critical safety net. There are 2 main tools that give them backup. First, you've got something called an ADS-B system. It's a mouthful, Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. But what it does is pretty simple. It lets planes broadcast their positions to each other. So you get this little digital map of all the nearby traffic, right there in the cockpit. The second tool is VFR flight following. That's where an air traffic controller on the ground is literally watching your flight on their radar and will just call out any potential conflicts over the radio. A human set of eyes. And like one pilot said, it's just plain bad practice not to use these tools. But, and this is so, so important, they don't get you off the hook. That technology doesn't relieve the pilot of their primary responsibility. Why? Because tech can fail. Controllers can get really busy. At the end of the day, the duty to see and avoid always rests with the person actually flying the plane. So,
Okay, we've got this super intense, mentally draining technique that is absolutely essential for staying safe. So the big question is, how does anyone keep this up? I mean, for hours on end, flight after flight.
The answer is practice. Simple as that. Just like pretty much everything else in flying, what starts as this conscious, really tiring effort, well, it slowly becomes second nature. That disciplined scan stops being a chore you have to force yourself to do, and it just becomes the way you see the world from the cockpit. It completely transforms from a technique into a deep-seated habit.
And that's really the big takeaway here, isn't it? Mastery in any complex field. I don't care if it's flying a plane, performing surgery, playing the guitar, it almost always comes down to this one thing, taking a hard, deliberate process and just practicing it so relentlessly that it becomes unconscious. It becomes second nature. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden skills in our own lives depend on that exact same journey from effort to habit?